Formula One on 5 Live.
The 2024 Formula One season is well and truly underway. Welcome to Bahrain International Circuit, the setting for the first round of this 24-race record-breaking season. My name is Rosanna Tennant and I'm down in the pit lane, and up in the commentary box we have our lead commentator Harry Benjamin, racing driver and broadcaster Alice Powell, and the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. We've already seen track action this weekend. Yesterday we had 2 practice sessions. That saw Daniel Ricciardo top the timesheets in the first one. That was for the newly named team RB, formerly AlphaTauri. And then it was Sir Lewis Hamilton who was fastest in the second practice session. So that's what was happening on track. Off track, there have also been developments. We've been following the ongoing story surrounding Christian Horner and the allegations of inappropriate behaviour towards a female colleague of his. And Andrew Benson, I want to ask you about this, because when we came off air after FP2, there were further developments in this case. What can you tell us?
Well, Horner's again denied allegations of inappropriate behaviour after the leak of a cache of messages to Formula One personnel, including media. Horner said that he wouldn't comment on anonymous speculation, but to reiterate, I've always denied the allegations. What happened, Rosanna, was that halfway through second practice yesterday, a drive of more than 70 messages, appearing to be between Horner and the complainant in this case, was emailed to 149 people in Formula One, including me. The leak contained a series of sexually suggestive messages between Horner and employee, but of course the veracity of them has not been established.
And have we seen Christian Horner in the paddock today? Do we expect him to be on the pit wall? I'm standing in the pit lane looking at the Red Bull pit wall, and at the moment he is not there, Andrew.
Well, he said yesterday that he remained fully focused on the race weekend ahead.
Andrew, I can tell you he is in the Red Bull garage. I've just turned around and he's now at the back of Max Verstappen's car.
Yes. Well, also, meanwhile, in the background, Rosanna, the FIA president Mohammed Ben Sulayem and Stefano Domenicali, the Formula One president, are meeting today, as they always do when they're both together at races. But this topic is definitely going to come up, and I believe that there's a possibility that the FIA might launch an ethics investigation into the situation.
Andrew, thanks so much for bringing us up to speed on how things stand when it comes to Christian Horner, the team principal of Red Bull Racing. Still the team principal at this stage, and I'm sure he and the team are, as he said, fully united. That's what his words were coming into this weekend, ahead of this record-breaking season. And of course, coming into this weekend, Alice Powell, we expect Red Bull to be right up at the sharp end, although it didn't seem that way yesterday. How much can things change then over the night? Like, how much work have they been doing to make sure that Max and Checo are ready to take on this circuit this weekend?
Well, yeah, they can still continue to make setup changes at the moment. It's up till qualifying, of course, and then once the qualifying they are restricted to what they can change. But yes, it was Lewis Hamilton and George Russell that sort of surprised us all. I was certainly surprised with their pace yesterday. Lewis Hamilton 2/10 clear of his teammate George Russell at the top of the times, but of course these are still early days for these cars, so I can guarantee you every single car down this pit lane will have had some kind of setup change. Even though Mercedes are top of the times, they will have still each individually made their own sort of setup changes. It's natural that is usually what you do in practice sessions. But one thing, Rosanna, and you're out there in the pit lane, so you'll be able to tell us. We've got a nice cool commentary box, but it does look certainly warm outside, especially compared to free practice 1. It's a couple of degrees warmer, but certainly free practice 2, according to our timing screens here, the track temperature is over 10 degrees warmer than it was yesterday in free practice 2.
Yes, and it does feel warmer in terms of the air temperature, Alice, a lot warmer. We were all wearing coats during FP2 yesterday, and as I look across the start-finish straight towards the fan zone where there's this giant Ferris wheel, the trees, I was remarking yesterday, were really being thrashed around by the wind, but they're a lot calmer today, so the wind isn't as strong as it was. That was really affecting the drivers yesterday. Of course, they're getting used to their new cars for the season, and quite a few drivers talking about how they were finding it difficult to control the car out there, and that was due to the gusts. And how much does that affect a Formula One car these days, Alice?
Yeah, it can, and it's something that you will often hear the drivers complain about, the wind, especially here in Bahrain. It does play a big part, but as you said, the wind is a lot calmer, so the cars should be a little bit more stable compared to what they were experiencing yesterday. But it's more the gusts of wind that can catch you out, because there's an inconsistency with the gust of wind. Usually you've got a steady tailwind or a steady headwind or a certain wind in a type of corner. you know to expect that each lap. But when it's those gusts, which we heard the drivers complaining about on the radio yesterday, you don't know when you're gonna get them, and they can be certainly unexpected. So the drivers will be pleased that the wind has died down.
Absolutely, and I am a little too. It was very gusty in the pit lane, which is rare. We have a green light at the end of the pit lane, but for the moment, no cars rushing out to be first on track. This is the final practice session ahead of qualifying later on, and Harry Benjamin, our lead commentator, is ready to talk us through it.
Thank you very much, Rosanna, always giving me the big sell. Day 2 of track action absolutely beginning in the heat of the Manamar Desert. 2 practice sessions down, 1 to go, and it was RB's Daniel Ricciardo who topped FP1 and Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes who topped FP2. And so far, as we've been discussing, trying to get a read on the ultimate pecking order is proving tricky. FP1 is now underway for those who wish to do a sync. It's 59 minutes and 9 seconds remaining of this last free practice session. No cars heading out yet onto this 5.4 kilometre track. 15 turns, 3 DRS zones, long straights, heavy braking zones, rough and bumpy surfaces. Racing driver Alice Powell is alongside me. Alice, why is no one going out straight away?
Because these conditions are not what we're going to be experiencing a little bit later on. Shock. It's going to be certainly much cooler when we go for qualifying, and some of the drivers are starting to get their race kit on. Alex Albon is now putting his balaclava on and his helmet, a process that is actually quite important to making sure everything is in place inside the helmet. But there's no rush because the conditions will be so much different later on today. As I said earlier, 10 degrees difference when we had free practice 1 to free practice 2 yesterday, and free practice 2 was probably, out of all the practice sessions, they say probably, it was 100% the more relevant session compared to the other 2 practice sessions that we will get. So we're just going to have to sit tight and wait, Harry.
That's exactly what George Russell is doing. Stood at the back of his garage, helmet on, arms crossed, just looking at his car. Valtteri Bottas is also in the back of the Sauber garage, doing up his overalls, balaclava on as he reaches for his helmet. The balaclava hiding his reinvigorated hairstyle, going for the mullet, very influenced by Australia now is Valtteri Bottas, the Finnish driver. The grandstand certainly filling up as well. A big Dutch contingency here, I would presume, out here supporting Max Verstappen.
I think most of them are in our hotel, aren't
they are. There's a lot of orange shirts, I'll tell you that right now. Andrew Benson, BBC's chief F1 writer, is here as well. And I mean, the biggest shock yesterday is that we couldn't even do a full, proper long-run corner. Such was the weirdness of yesterday's FP2 session. What are your thoughts reflecting on that and how we enter today's action, Andrew?
Well, if you just bear with me for a second, Harry, I will find you some long run times. Here we are. Yes, so unsurprisingly, Verstappen was the quickest on the long run, followed by his teammate Sergio Perez. Oscar Piastri did a good run in the McLaren, just behind Perez, who was about a tenth behind Verstappen. And then in order, it was the Mercedes drivers followed by the Ferrari drivers and Fernando Alonso, which is kind of what we expected before we came here.
Okay, so that gives, well, a little bit more of an inkling into what the pecking order will be. Of course, qualifying will be the ultimate decider once we get under the lights here in Bahrain. It is a night race and everything is brought forward a day early due to Ramadan in this part of the world. It will be the same next week when we are in Saudi Arabia as well. A little bit of work going on down on the front end of the Mercedes car. Logan Sargent in the Williams as well is just at the back of his garage. Doesn't seem to be in too much of a rush to get in his car. Taking a quick swig of water. The American back for a second season in the sport. And indeed, there are a lot of drivers that are under pressure this year because, well, in the off-season, if you happen to miss it, Lewis Hamilton signed for Ferrari to replace Carlos Sainz. That doesn't happen until 2025. So we still have a full season where Hamilton is in a Mercedes, Sainz will be in a Ferrari. But I mean, Alice, what this does do is that it absolutely explodes the driver market for next year.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. And I'm excited to see which drivers will make a move. As you say, quite a few under pressure.
12 out of contract at the end of this season.
That's a decent number. That's a surprisingly high number, really. But probably those two that are really under pressure the most, I would say it would be Sergio Perez. He's certainly, I think in that second seat at Red Bull, you're always under pressure, aren't you? And then possibly Esteban Ocon you could count as being one of those in the Alpine as well, who struggled a little bit compared to Pierre Gasly. It was his first year at the team last year with Alpine, and he struggled, didn't he, Esteban, up against his teammate. As Daniel Ricciardo is having a good chat with the guests, keeping the sponsors happy in the back of the garage. Jackie Stewart is in there as well. And he's always a character, isn't it? I still don't understand how he turns up and he walks up and down this paddock and out around the circuit. Certainly at his age, not saying that he's old.
He's giving a tour as well, isn't he?
Yeah, no, he is. He's brilliant.
Brilliant, as you're right, Daniel Ricciardo, the man who topped the first free practice 1 session, the first bit of track action of the day, and I can hear a car going towards the end of the pits. I think it's one of the Mercedes that has just pulled out of the garage. It's Lewis Hamilton who will take to the track. Absolutely, first on-track action of 2024. We're trying to get a read on the pecking order, but so far Daniel Ricciardo in the RB topped FP1, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes topped FP2. It won't be until qualifying later this evening that we get a real idea of the proper pecking order, but FP3 is happening now. Lewis Hamilton has just gone out on track, so we'll get an indication of the speed, but we're still expecting Max Verstappen and Red Bull to be at the top of the field. So Lewis Hamilton is out on the track now. We just did a little hit into 5 Live there, so I'll do another sync point for you. It's 53 minutes and 19, 18, 17 seconds as we make our way through this practice session. Nobody's gone out on track yet until Lewis Hamilton just moments ago. Good time to head down to Rosanna Tennant in the pit lane.
Yes, Harry, which means the pit lane is quite busy because everyone's getting ready to send their drivers out. Lewis Hamilton out first, as you say. Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez both out of the car, still chatting with their mechanics at the back of the garage. And I have to tell you, Christian Horner is now on the pit wall. He made his way across the pit lane. Photographers wanting to get a picture of him. Now they've kind of turned their attention back to the garage. They're not that interested in taking more photos of the team principal. He keeps on turning around and looking back into the garage. He's also been glancing down the pit lane towards the Mercedes garage, where George Russell is still sitting in his car waiting to be released. The mechanics are just putting the final few touches to the car, one of them adjusting his wing mirror. How about that? The right wing mirror. You don't want to go out on track and not be able to see behind you, do you? So yeah, Rich is just tidying that up for him, and I'm sure George will then be heading out on track like his teammate, just for this year now, of course we know, has done. And it'll be interesting to see how Lewis Hamilton fares in this session after looking pretty strong yesterday, but they were playing it down a little, weren't they? Because they didn't really understand where that performance had come from.
Yeah, I suppose it doesn't matter what car you're in, you've still got to do mirror signal manoeuvre, haven't you? But it was an interesting one to see both Mercedes on top yesterday, Andrew.
It was, but Red Bull's pace was disguised by the fact that they weren't running their engine in as higher power mode as Mercedes were. That explains why Max Verstappen was only fourth, with the Mercedes first and second. I think everybody today is expecting the Red Bull, particularly of Verstappen, to be on pole. The question is how much by. Before the cars took to the track yesterday, one team principal was saying he thought Verstappen had half a second on everybody else. We'll have to wait and see. The Ferraris look quite quick over one lap. Mercedes, I think they feel that they've got things in this car that they've learned since the test, that they can exploit it much more. They've got a lot to learn because it's so new compared to their sort of discredited design philosophy of the last 2 years. But both drivers have been clear that although it's sort of the vices of last year have been removed, particularly the nervous rear end, or the unpredictable rear end I should say, it just hasn't quite got enough downforce yet.
No, they've made some interesting changes, haven't they, Mercedes? They've changed, everyone talking about the side pod that now Red Bull have seen to have adapted. They've had that different front wing on the front where several people have been questioning if it's legal, if it's not legal. But as well at the rear of the car, they've opted to go for a push rod suspension where they had a pull rod suspension before. So basically the push rod is slightly higher on the chassis. It pushes the torsion spring via the push rod, so it's slightly easier to access everything rather than having it all in the gearbox, which is what the pull rod suspension is much lower down into the car. So they have said that has possibly helped with the stability of the car, because that's what both drivers, isn't it? We're complaining about George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. We're complaining a lot about the stability, and I know what it's like as a driver when you're entering a corner and you're like, right, how is this car going to react? Is it going to be nice and planted, or am I going to be turning in and I'm going to be getting that great big snap? But that's just one of the changes that will certainly have helped potentially the feel of the car for the drivers.
Yes, so a push rod and a pull rod, for people who are not quite perhaps clear on this, it's the diagonally mounted arm between the wheel and the suspension elements. And for many years, a push rod at the rear was standard. And then in the early 2010s, Adrian Newey, surprise, surprise, turned things around and made the pull rod so that the rod attaches to the suspension elements at the sort of bottom end of the gearbox rather than the top at the rear, because he did it for aerodynamic reasons on, I think it was the RB, whatever the car in 2009 was, which set a design trend for the next 5 years, effectively. And everybody migrated to that design. And then with these regulations, guess what? Adrian Newey turned things around and put a push rod at the rear, and then also inverted the front suspension. So everybody was using a push rod at the front. And Ferrari tried a pull rod in the Alonso era into 2011, 2012, but then went back to a push rod. But Newey converted the Red Bull to a pull rod, again for aerodynamic reasons, at the start of 2022, and more teams have started to migrate that way. What's interesting about Mercedes is that while they've followed the Red Bull route with the push rod at the back, they haven't followed the Red Bull route with the pull rod at the front. They've stuck with the push rod. Now, each design can theoretically work as well as the other, but there are pros and cons to each in terms of suspension kinematics, aerodynamics, how the airflow hits the suspension elements. Ferrari also, we're just looking at Charles Leclerc in the pits on the TV screen, they're still stuck with a push rod at the front. Well, I can't tell you whether the pull rod is a thing that everybody should have gone to, but teams like Mercedes and Ferrari who haven't done, Aston Martin also haven't done, by the way, they obviously think that they can make it work.
For those teams, though, do they also not, for certain parts, and this is sort of getting at a bigger question that we were talking about throughout the weekend about sharing parts amongst teams, for this kind of thing, do they not have to sort of almost follow, if you're being supplied parts by Mercedes or Red Bull, you're kind of forced one way in your design element in that case?
Theoretically, yes, but what's interesting is that Williams, who buy some parts from Mercedes, have not switched to a push rod at the back. They've stuck with their old design, so you don't have to. It still can be a choice.
46 minutes and 57, 56, 55 seconds remain of free practice 3. The two Ferraris were the sounds you heard, gearing up to leave the garages. Are now out on track. Lewis Hamilton was the first out on track. He set a lap time on the soft compounder tyre. He went fastest with a 1:32.733, and Sainz and Leclerc currently on their out laps. Nobody is in a major rush to get out or even get in to their cars. Seeing lots of drivers just stood either holding their helmets or with them placed on as they stand at the back of their garage looking on at their cars. But Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz have delighted us by heading out. Charles Leclerc, who signed a long-term contract with Ferrari in the off-season, he will remain there and will line up alongside Lewis Hamilton in 2025. That leaves Carlos Sainz as he makes his way through turns 1 and 2 on his first flying lap, again on the soft compounder tyre, without a seat for the time being. Lots of speculation about where he will go as he navigates this lap. Alice, why don't you talk us through a little bit of Carlos's lap here?
Certainly can. He's already 3/10 down, though, compared to Lewis Hamilton in the first sector, but he's heading down now to turn 8, which is a tight hairpin, and then you get the squirt up to 9, a DRS detection zone just before turn 9, and it's a very tight and tricky section of track there where you're braking and turning at the same time, so it really runs the risk, and we've seen many drivers do it across testing and across the past couple of days as well, locking up that front left tyre, and you can really put people under pressure there during a race. But he's got out of that nicely, no lockups. He's now up through the high-speed section of 12 and into the final sector of turn 13 and blasting down the straight. But he is purple, Harry. He's up in the middle sector, purple fastest of anyone overall, and then into what I call the final corner. On the track map it isn't the final corner, but into turn 14, and that's the sound you can hear now as we ride on board. He's going to head across the line, and where is Carlos Sainz going to go? Just slotting in behind Lewis Hamilton, just under a tenth off.
Yeah, and interestingly, Alice and Harry, sorry, I'm struggling to get my multi-syllable words out this morning. Everyone's on the soft tyre again, apart from Alex Albon, which, as we were discussing yesterday, suggests even more that it's going to be the medium and the hard tyres that are the focus for the race.
Yeah, everyone getting rid of those soft tyres early before qualifying takes place later today, and we head into that race. Of course, many of the teams will be keeping set softs if they make it into Q3 for qualifying on Saturday, which you can hear today, which you can hear on 5 Sports Extra. Gets going at 3:55 UK time, so do join us for that. Leclerc's gone fastest, a 1:32.677 on the soft compound tyre, less than half a tenth between himself and Lewis Hamilton. Then it's Carlos Sainz in third. Also out on track, we've had the 2 Saubers go out. Albon came out, then came straight back in again. The 2 Hasses, Sergio Perez, he's gone out on the hard compounded tyre, interestingly. Lando Norris and Lance Stroll are now also out on track. So we're starting to get a little bit of movement on the track, but still about half the drivers in the pit lane, which is where Rosanna is.
I am, and I'm outside the Aston Martin garage because the mechanics just released Lance Stroll, gave him the kind of come on, come out of the garage. As he got out into the fast lane, Lando Norris was there in the McLaren, so Lance Stroll had to pump the brakes. I don't think there was any harm done, and I think they all went on their way happily, but yeah, it's all quiet, and then suddenly they all decide to leave at once.
Follow the leader.
Typical Formula One, isn't it? As they all make their way out, Sergio Perez is currently trying to find himself a bit of space on track. One of the men we've mentioned who is under pressure to keep that Red Bull seat. He's got it until the end of the year. Theoretically, that's when his contract ends, but it has been told by the team that if he cannot close that gap, particularly in qualifying to Max Verstappen, they will be looking at alternatives. And it's not like Red Bull aren't short of alternatives for that second seat.
No, they're certainly not, but Sergio Perez, he always starts.
I had a very nasty shift, upshift. Okay, having a look.
He's had a nasty upshift going up the box somewhere, and that's Max Verstappen was struggling going up and down the box. He's very sensitive to his gear changes, and that was in the free practice 1 session that we had yesterday. But no more complaints in free practice 2, or certainly I didn't hear over the radio from Max Verstappen. Perez now comes through turn 4 up to the great section of turn 5, 6 and into 7. But he usually starts seasons fairly strong, doesn't he, compared to Max? And then that gap throughout the year starts to open. So we'll be interested to see how he gets on now at the first round, and then how that continues in the next several races.
Well, one thing that was interesting that I heard this weekend, Alice, was Charles Leclerc said on Wednesday, I get my days right because everything's shifted
That's what
forward.
I'm saying yesterday and tomorrow, because I'm going to get them wrong.
He said they were struggling with too much understeer, and he thought that was something that was a problem all the way up and down the pit lane. Too little front grip. And it's certainly true at Mercedes, because George Russell was also talking about understeer yesterday. So maybe it's something to do with the tyres, the new tyres that Pirelli have introduced this year. They're still overheating, like they always do, which wrecks the racing, but that's a separate topic. But if these tyres are inherently understeery at the start of the season, and the cars are inherently understeery, that's what helps Perez in comparison with Verstappen. And the big turnaround last year, ironically, was in the 4th race that Perez won, but Verstappen was stuck behind him in Baku, but couldn't get past him for some reason. But Perez was genuinely quick that weekend. But while stuck behind Perez, Verstappen spent a lot of time playing with the various tools that the drivers have on the wheel, with things like diff settings and brakes and what have you, and he found a way forward for his driving style to make that Red Bull much more responsive for him. So that's why when we got to Miami for the next race, Verstappen humiliated Perez there, having started 9th on the grid, basically pretty much caught him by the end of the first stint and went on to dominate the race. And Verstappen never looked back from that point on.
There we go.
It's a mental game,
benefit.
isn't it?
Yeah, no, and a lot of it is, you know, the mental side of sport is huge. Whatever sport you play, it's massively important. So Perez will know, I'm sure, as it does every driver, that keeping mental stability throughout a season is really key. But until you're actually in the car and you're in that seat and you're in that driver's position, it's extremely easy for us to sit here and say, well, he just needs to be a bit stronger in the head, doesn't he? He needs to sort his head out. He needs to not worry about Max, not worry about this. Honestly, it's very easy for us to sit here and to say that, because Formula One is just... it's such an intense sport. You go down the paddock and everyone's looking at you. You know, you're a driver, you're one of these 20 drivers that everyone wants to get a piece of. So it can be very lonely at times, and it's certainly a high pressure environment. That is whether you're a Formula 1 driver or a Formula 3 driver. As the sound you can hear now is us riding on board with George Russell. He's gone fastest overall in the middle sector. He's going to come up to the line. It's Lance Stroll that heads the times at the moment, and just as I say that, up goes George Russell, half a second clear. But just yesterday's times, Harry, Hamilton topped the session with a 1:30.3, and currently at the moment we're on a 1:31.8. So certainly the track is a little bit slower because it will be hotter. But of course, what can have a big effect is engine modes and how much fuel the drivers will be running in the cars as well.
Yeah, it is Russell, fastest from Stroll, Magnussen, Norris, Leclerc, the top 5, Hamilton, Sainz, Hülkenberg, Bottas, Verstappen has just gone 10th, then it's Perez in 11th, Zhou in 12th with the last representative lap time. We'll also see what Albon, Piastri, Alonso and Sargent have got. They're out on track at the moment. Interestingly, everybody's on softs bar the 2 Red Bulls. They've got out on the hard compound tyre. Is this a way of just trying to still keep their cards close to their chest, not wanting to reveal true pace yet? We've got the hardest compound of tyres available here in Bahrain due to the nature of the circuit. It's quite abrasive, it's quite rough, but they haven't gone out on that soft tyre.
Well, Andrew's alluded that likely it will be a medium or hard tyre that we're going to see the drivers run during the race. So it could be a number of options that they want to hop on the hard tyre just to see how it feels, how it's reacting to the drivers, get both drivers to have a little bit of a feel of the hard tyre on the track at the moment. But also, yeah, it could be they want to keep their cars a bit close to their chest. There'll be some reason. I very much doubt they're going to be like, we're going to fool everyone by going on the hard tyre.
Yeah, it's not about pace disguising, that's for absolutely sure. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different reasons. It could be strategic for sure. I mean, one thing to bear in mind, looks like Alonso is about to go fastest on his soft tyres, by the way, as he comes through the second sector. But, you know, first of all, bear in mind that the Red Bull has better tyre degradation than everything else, so it can afford probably to get away with a softer selection of race compounds. So maybe other people are thinking hard, medium. They might be thinking hard, medium, soft, or hard, medium. All sorts of things like that could be at play there. And Alonso does go fastest by 0.239 seconds from George Russell.
He does indeed, with a 1:31.582 for Fernando Alonso, the oldest driver in the field, most experienced, and the circuit here celebrating 20 years on the F1 calendar. And Fernando Alonso is the only driver on the grid who raced in the very first Bahrain Grand Prix back in 2004. Indeed, he's raced on the 3 different layouts that we've had here, the traditional Grand Prix circuit, the longer endurance one, and the outer loop that was the Sakir Grand Prix.
He's not the only driver to race on all 3, though, of course.
No.
Lewis Hamilton was here in 2010 as well. But I think it's and Nico Hülkenberg, but it's only those 2, I think, looking up and down the grid now, that have experienced all 3 Bahrain layouts. Yeah.
No, and I think it is a track a lot of drivers actually do quite like. It does certainly give us some good racing here and there. This is the sound of the RB making its way down the main straight. Daniel Ricciardo at the wheel, back for his first full season since he departed McLaren a couple of years ago, as he makes his way up through turns 1 and 2, starts to head a little bit uphill, then he gets to the DRS line, and Perez on the radio.
I feel the upshift is really bad. Yeah, copy.
So Perez still not particularly happy, but just noticed Ricciardo was driving down the straight because we were riding on board, and it was the camera angle that's just over the driver's left shoulder. And I was looking, he's only got one hand on the wheel. He was driving down pretty much but most of that main straight with one hand on the wheel, so his right hand on the wheel. And then when he got to probably about 50 metres before he was going to brake, which is actually a short distance when you're travelling over 180 mile an hour, he put his left hand back on the wheel. So either he's taking it easy, or there's something else down there.
I tell you what, down there in the pit lane, it is becoming a little cooler. The sun is starting to dip behind the grandstand on the start-finish straight, so most of the pit lane is now in shade, just a little bit of light shining into the garages, but it's starting getting a bit cooler. I wonder if it's going to get as cool as it did last night, because that will change things up for qualifying, and how the teams then react with such a short window between this FP3 session and qualifying, Alice.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're likely to see more drivers come out later towards the end. There's only at the moment is Tsunoda, Ocon and Gasly who haven't set a time. So, of course, it does get cold quite quickly here, doesn't it, here in Bahrain. So certainly I expect it to be much busier towards the end of the session, and that's when the drivers will want to be on the track. Last, as you said, it's closer to qualifying and will be slightly closer to the conditions. But again, I just noticed on that camera angle, going down the back straight, Ricciardo's left hand was off the wheel again. So I don't know if the RB has got something down there in the cockpit. Wasn't there something on one of the cars one year where there was something down to the drivers, inside the driver's cockpit, maybe?
Well, I always used to remember Nico Rosberg moving the brake bias.
He's got a great, yeah, so maybe he could be playing with the brake bias, possibly in between corners. That's certainly what a lot of drivers tend to do, but it's usually here in driver's width. But here's a hand was not in camera angle sight at all, so we'll keep an eye on that one.
We'll try and do a bit more snooping on that. As you say, though, still everyone set a lap time bar the two Alpines of Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, who had a tough day at the office yesterday. They'll be hoping for a little bit more understanding as they dial in that Alpine, which has had a complete overhaul for this season. Everything bar the steering wheel changed as they chase away to find themselves back towards the front end. And saying that, Ocon has just set a lap time on the soft compound tyre. He's gone 12th fastest, and that puts him with a 1:33.0 as Alex Albon starts a lap in his Williams. James Vowles was watching on from the pit lane as he makes his way through into turns 1 and 2. The two McLarens, both, I think, in the pit lane, which is where Rosanna finds herself.
Yeah, and I'm outside Lando Norris's garage, where the mechanics are working very quickly on the front end of Lando's car. The front wing, the nose is off, it's on a stand, and they're working on the front suspension. So it's pretty late in the day to be making some changes, but you know, you've got to do what you've got to do so that you're ready for qualifying. And Lando yesterday, I mean, even though he was right up at the sharp end during the day, he was still pretty level-headed, as he always is, about how he was going on. He said it was been a reasonable day. Of course, he was P2 in FP1 and then down in P20, so it's a little bit strange, that second patch. But he said he's happy with how the Thursday went overall, and they made some progress with the car, but they still got plenty of things to improve on. So maybe this is just him starting to get a bit more comfortable with the balance and asking the team for some changes.
Yeah, thanks, Rosanna. We were certainly asking questions after yesterday's practice, weren't we? We saw Norris all the way down at the bottom of the timesheets. But I suppose that's everybody's going to be dialing in and understanding more and more with each lap. These days we get such limited testing in the current cars. You know, they had 3 days last week, which they split between both drivers. So you're getting a day and a half, really, between each driver. So these practice sessions are just crucial for finding not just only pace, but also for finding those reliability worries that they want to get rid of, because this is the longest season in Formula One history. So they've got to hit the ground running.
These sessions are certainly important. The simulator would have been working non-stop over the winter with the simulator drivers, as we're just witnessing a replay of Alex Albon getting a snap of oversteer on the exit there, what looked like turn 13. Sound you can hear is riding on board with Max Verstappen, who's still cruising around at the moment on those hard tyres, and looking not too bad, I would say, for a hard tyre lap, to be honest. 1.4 seconds off the pace in P 14. But these sessions, yes, they are vital, but the tricky part is when we come to Bahrain, as we've discussed before, is the time of day that everything takes place. It's much harder for the teams to sort of get a good gauge, because there's only real one representative session of what you're going to get in the most important sessions of the weekend, which is the qualifying session, and of course the race, which is the most important, which is free practice 2. So then the free practice 1 and free practice 3 can sort of be frustrating in terms of the conditions, but there's still, of course, plenty of information gathering that the teams will be doing.
Yeah. And worth noting, actually, well, it will be 24 races this season, the longest in F1 history. China is going to be back on the calendar, first time since 2019. Imola is also back after its cancellation due to the flooding in the region last year as well. We've also got the introduction of Formula One's grouping of the calendar to meet its sustainability targets. So that rejiggles it slightly. So next week we'll head to Saudi Arabia, then we're over a week off, then we're over in Australia on the 24th of March. The Japanese Grand Prix in Suzuka signed a 5-year extension in the off-season. That now moves much earlier in the calendar in April, before we then head back to China and then Miami before Imola kicks things off in May for the European leg of the season. So just worth keeping an eye on how the calendar shapes up this year. Some of the trickiest corners are on this Bahrain circuit, aren't they? Particularly the double left cambered 9 and 10. They can even catch people out like Lewis Hamilton. So quick you can snatch a break.
Yeah, that's what we spoke about earlier. Lewis Hamilton just snatching that break. You have got some camber in your favour there, which certainly does help. However, you're braking and turning at the same time. So from a driver's point of view, you're turning left. So the inside front left wheel becomes light, and then gradually, as the speed starts to come off the car, you lose downforce. But with a certain amount of brake pressure and with the speed decreasing, the more likely you are to have that front lock-up. So with more steering angle and more brake pressure at a slower speed, that front tyre let's say we're going left, as we are, that front left will lock up. And then if you have a nasty lock-up, every time you then come into that corner or any other corner that you're turning left and you're having a significant amount of brake on, you'll just find that it will just find that flat spot, and of course it will get worse and worse and worse, and you'll start wearing through, and then eventually you'll be vibrating so much down the straight you can't see where you're going, and then you can either get a puncture or the tyre will delaminate. So that's one thing that is very important for these drivers to make sure during this race, because there's high degradation at this circuit, is trying to avoid that flat spot there down at turn 10.
Well, it's Lewis Hamilton who has the most amount of laps on the board so far, 11 to his name, as Pierre Gasly, who has one of the least amount to his name. He's only done 5, he embarks on his 5th lap now on the soft compound tyre. Speeds down the main straight. The DRS wing is open on the rear wing. The drag reduction system flap shuts under braking as he moves into turn 1 and 2, then heads uphill before he then makes the drag down towards turn 4. Another DRS zone. Slings it into the right-hander. A good overtaking opportunity come the race. Runs out wide, but not 4 wheels all over the white line. Track limits there being watched like a hawk throughout the years as he makes his way through the S section of 5, 6 and 7, chucking the car left, right, then left again before the braking zone of turn 8. Starting to head uphill once again towards this corner that we've been talking about, this series of corner. Double left-hander, cambered, easy to lock up through 9 and 10. Gasly makes it through, but so far it's smooth, but the speed just doesn't quite seem to be there for the Frenchman, back for his 2nd year with Alpine, now heading through the left-hander of turn 11 uphill. The right-hander of 12 approaches flat out if you can. That's where you can really feel the effect of the wind on these Formula One cars before he swoops round another right-hander of 13 into the sunshine as it glances off of the pink and carbon coloured Alpine before he makes the final 2 corners of 14, 15. They say it's a corner. In these cars, it's not really. Flat out to the line, DRS open, crosses the line, 1.9 seconds off for Pierre Gasly in 17th. Only ahead of Piastri at the moment, Perez and Joe are the cars behind him. 25 minutes and 6 seconds remain of this free practice 3 session. The last practice session before qualifying gets going a little later this evening under the lights, and you can hear that live on 5 Sports Extra from 3:55 UK time. It's Alonso, currently fastest in the Aston Martin. Everybody on the soft compounder tyre, bar the 2 Red Bulls. Alonso ahead of Russell, Leclerc, Tsunoda, Sainz, the top 5. Stroll, Magnussen, Albon, Norris, Hamilton, the top 10. Ricciardo, Ocon, Hülkenberg, Verstappen, Sargent, the top 15. Bottas, Gasly, Piastri, Perez and Zhou, the 20 drivers who have now all been out there to set a lap time after what was a bit of a slow start to free practice 3 in the heat of the day. Indeed, air temperature now around about 20 degrees Celsius, track temperature 31.5 degrees Celsius. It has felt a little bit hotter today than the other days, but it's that wind that catches you out, and as the sun gets lower in the sky as we get later into the day, the temperatures will keep cooling down. I suppose the later you go out in this session, the more representative running you might get.
The speed has picked up ever so slightly and actually changed direction as well now. Looking out of our commentary box window, the big Bahraini flag, an FIA flag and a Formula 1 flag, so we've got plenty to choose from across this circuit, where it was blowing a little bit less earlier, so that can make it a little bit trickier for the drivers. But the sound you can hear now is riding on board with George Russell, who is out on the soft tyre, but he's not setting the world alight. He's sitting P2 currently, 2/10 off Fernando Alonso, but looking at the sector times, he won't be improving his time, so he won't be making any improvements up the order. But still, majority of the drivers, Harry, probably waiting in the pit lane in their garages a little bit longer. We've only got Russell, Alonso's on an outlap, so is Leclerc, Sainz is out there as well, Magnussen, and then Piastri. Those are our only drivers at the moment that are on circuit.
Question for you. We're talking about the driver moves a lot. George Russell will be the team leader next year. He'll have a new teammate, whoever that may be. Plan A at the moment appears to be the young F2 Mercedes hotshot Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Plan B might well be Fernando Alonso. In either respect, do you feel George Russell is now in a position where he can be that team leader and push that Mercedes team forward and make it his own? Because he very much came into Lewis Hamilton's team.
I think he can. He's had plenty of experience. He's had a good, well, I guess he wouldn't say that he's his teacher, but he's had a good teammate in Lewis Hamilton. So George, I know we've been talking about over the weekend that it seems a little bit of friction between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. So of course George will want to make sure that the team is his own, and he will be, as you said, let's say they bring Antonelli in next year, who graduates into Formula 2 this year from F4. He will be the much more experienced driver, so George will naturally be the one they will look out to lead the team and to make those improvements. But yeah, I can't see any reason why George isn't capable of doing that, and I'm sure he will thrive and enjoy the role very much.
A continuation of our conversation, Andrew, that we had on our preview show that we recorded for the weekend. We ended up discussing Leclerc and Hamilton as teammates together, and you suspect, as Leclerc is on a lap and Carlos Sainz very quickly moves out of the way, drives off the track in the run towards turn 11. No harm done there for either driver, but Leclerc is out there at the moment and pushing. You think that, or you suspect that Leclerc will be quicker than Hamilton?
I don't think I went quite that far, Harry. I think it was the idea of,
based on the data so far,
the idea of Hamilton blowing Leclerc away was raised,
okay,
if I remember rightly. And I said the one thing that's not going to happen is Lewis Hamilton blowing Charles Leclerc away.
And what I wanted to ask you but didn't get the chance to was, okay, if Leclerc is quicker than Hamilton, what does that mean for Lewis Hamilton?
Well, look, it's final practice on the first race of the season ahead of the season you're talking about. It's a really interesting question. I mean, obviously Hamilton's going to Ferrari to be successful, and he wants to make it his team. He wants the team to respond to his wishes and so on and so forth, like Mercedes have for the last decade. Obviously, going to be harder to integrate himself within the team if he's not as quick as his teammate. But let's keep this in perspective. If whoever's quicker, it's going to be by very small margins. Formula One's not just about Saturday afternoons or Saturday evenings in the case of this weekend. It's about the Grand Prix. And I think on the evidence of their careers so far, you would probably, if you were to back one or other of them to be ahead over the season, you would probably back Hamilton at this stage. Having said that, Russell went into Mercedes in 2022 and he did beat Hamilton over a season. Although, having said that, Hamilton then beat Russell pretty convincingly over last season. My comment about Leclerc's qualifying pace is that there's been, I think it's 0.05 of difference between Russell and Hamilton in absolute qualifying pace on average over the last 2 seasons. I can't remember which way round it is. I think Russell might even have been slightly quicker in 2023, but it's 0.05. And I think Charles Leclerc, if I had to put my, not that I bet, not I'm a betting person, but I have a feeling Charles Leclerc is quicker over 1 lap than George Russell. Not by a huge amount, but still. So if he's quick, if that's true, then he may well be quicker over 1 lap over a season by a little bit than Lewis Hamilton. That's all I was trying to say.
No, it sets it up for a great season and for one that we're all going to want to watch and listen to. But as we say, we've still got a whole season to get through before we get to that particular talking point. But it is one that is being discussed. Speak of Lewis Hamilton, he has still got a year, 24 races to go with Mercedes. And that is where Rosanna Tennant finds herself down in the pit lane.
And I'm watching about 6 mechanics working very quickly at the front of the car, working on the brakes. I'm being told that it's a setup change, but the drums come off, it's gone back on, sort of caked in, and now they are bringing the tyres out to the car. So it looks like he's going to be ready to go fairly shortly, but the mechanic's working so fast. Honestly, the way they spin the spanners down here, that's my little phrase, spin the spanners, there you go, is just incredible. They work so fast, and especially after winter break, you might think they're a little rusty, but no, the mechanics are straight on it. So apparently some setup changes being made to Lewis's car, and both he and George are in the garage at the moment, but it looks like George's side of the garage are readying themselves to release him out onto track again, and it's getting a little cooler out on track, a few degrees cooler than when we started this session, the track temp dropping from 35 to about 32. How's that going to affect things? I've been hearing some of the drivers on the radio, Kevin Magnussen from Haas, asking for information about that softer tyre, what the window is, what that drop-off is for that particular tyre. So the drivers trying to get as much information in this final practice session as they can as they head into qualifying, where no doubt that soft tyre is going to be all important for Q3 and setting our top 10.
Talking about the soft tyre, Rosanna, and Sergio Perez has just gone fastest overall of anybody in that first sector. He is now on the soft tyre and he's on course to possibly knock Fernando Alonso off the top spot in this last and final practice session before qualifying, as he heads down now into turn 11, keeps it just within track limits and sweeps uphill into 12, easily flat out in a Formula One car, and then onto the brakes for 13. Several drivers have been caught for track limits on the exit of 13, but Perez keeps it nicely within those white lines, or the curb on the outside, and then down into 14, and he is fastest of anyone as well in the middle sector. He's going to come across the line and surely jump up to the top of the timesheets, which he does comfortably, 0.3 of a second clear of Fernando Alonso. So we just wait now for Max Verstappen to emerge, and guess what, he has, and it looks like, Harry, he might go fastest in that first sector.
Perez fastest, but here comes Max Verstappen, who has put on that soft tyre now as he speeds through the second sector. The S's are 5, 6 and 7, left, right and left again. That Red Bull snapping nicely under the Dutchman's control as he now heads downhill into the braking zone of turn 9 and 10, the left-hander, before he's on the throttle up through the gears, heading down the straight towards turn 11. A dose of DRS to boot as it slams shut under braking for turn 11. A light touch to the left-hand side as he now heads back uphill, flat out through turn 12 and enters the final sector of this Bahrain circuit. He's 2/10 clear of Sergio Perez so far. He's purple in Sector 1, purple in Sector 2. Is this Red Bull and Max Verstappen finally showing us what they've got? 2 final corners remain for the reigning champion as he puts his foot to the floor and drives to the line. DRS open. Verstappen to the top of the times with a 1 minute 31.062. He goes just over a tenth and a half clear of his teammate Sergio Perez. Alonso, Russell and Leclerc, the top 5. Steely faces from within the Red Bull garage, not giving anything away after those 2 laps, but having not really seen Red Bull at the top of the timing screens in FP1 or FP2, now it seems like business as usual as they're back at the top with 14 minutes and 27 seconds remaining.
Yeah, normal service has resumed as a few other drivers emerging now out on the soft tyre. No one at the moment is doing any personal best apart from Sargent. He's jumped up into 7th place, just ahead, with a whisker ahead of Alex Albon, who's in 8th place. So we'll keep an eye and see out of our commentary box window whether any more will emerge. Lance Stroll is one of those who looks like he is certainly on a push lap as he heads down into turn 4. DRS wide open, swings into the tricky turn 4. You never know whether you're going to have a bit of understeer or a bit of oversteer going through there, and he is only just under half a tenth off Max Verstappen in that first sector, so a good effort there from Lance Stroll as he finds his way nicely through 8 into 9. No lockups there from Stroll, manages to make the apex quite nicely, and this looks like, if he keeps it up, guys, this could be quite a decent lap.
It could be quite a nice lap from Lance Stroll in that Aston Martin. While he finishes it off, coming through the final sector, let's check in with Rosanna. What's going on down at Mercedes, Rosanna?
Well, both cars have just been let go. I was talking to you about the work going on Lewis Hamilton's car at the front end. That was all bolted back together and he was released first, then his teammate George Russell. And of course the Red Bulls have now unleashed themselves and shown us what they've got potentially. And so it feels like everyone else is now going to go out there and see if they can match up to that time. A bit interesting, I've just had an email come through from the FIA, and I'm sure Andrew Benson has as well, from the technical delegate saying that Lando Norris has taken on a new energy store and a new control electronics, which is a bit weird at this stage of the weekend. Does that mean reliability issues already rearing their ugly head, guys?
Well, they would certainly hope not for Lando's case, but Oscar Piastri as well finds himself right at the bottom of the timing screens in 20th and last, much like Lando Norris yesterday. This isn't ideal, no matter what way you look at it, for McLaren. Alonso, fastest. We were following Lance Stroll's lap. He managed to go 4th fastest, 4 tenths off his teammate. Alonso fastest with a 1:39. A whisker between himself and Verstappen, just less than a tenth of a second. Then it's Perez, Stroll, Russell. Lando Norris, though, is back out on the circuit, and he's going quick as well on the soft compound tyres, fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Lost a bit of time in the final sector, but it's still enough to go 3rd fastest. So certainly there's speed in that McLaren at the very least. A tenth and a half off of Fernando Alonso, and his teammate Oscar Piastri, who was at the bottom of the timing screens, now finds himself right up there too. He slots into 4th place, another 10th off his teammate.
Lewis Hamilton now is out there. He's done a personal best in the first sector on the soft tyre, of course. It will be the final runs really before qualifying. 1/10 off though from Max Verstappen in the first sector, so he is slightly down as he put it quite nicely there through turn 11 up the hill. He's got a little bit of traffic. That looked like that might have been Lance Stroll. So Hamilton, I would expect him to be certainly a little bit compromised there going into 12, and he is nearly 2 tenths down from Max Verstappen, sorry, from Fernando Alonso. But this is certainly going to propel him right up the order. He's currently in 16th place as he's on the main straight now, gets to DRS line. DRS fires open and Hamilton jumps up to P7, which is maybe a little bit disappointing from where they were yesterday.
Yeah, we'll see what his teammates got as well. George Russell on a fast lap 2, coming through sector 1, not quite as quick as his teammate, finding a little bit of more time in the middle sector. Here's what Alonso's got to say.
P1, 10th quicker than Verstappen.
Yeah, copy. Another step better. I'm connected with the car, it's good.
Copy, mate.
Fernando Alonso saying he's connected with the car. Well, that could mean trouble for everybody else in the field. Russell continues on his lap. Personal best in sector 2 as he's only got a couple of corners left. The sun starts to hang low in the sky here in Bahrain, around this Bahrain International Circuit, built on the former camel farm in the Manamar Desert. Russell crosses the line, fastest of anybody in the final sector, and that is enough to put him 4th fastest overall at 1:31.1. So found more time compared to his teammate. Couple of tenths up from Lewis Hamilton. It's Alonso, Verstappen, Norris, Russell, Piastri, the top 5. And we're now beginning to see in the closing stages of this FP3 some fast, soft tyre running. And I think we might have seen a potential reason for why Hamilton is a couple of tenths off of his teammate, Alice.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about with turn 4. He's turned in, the car turned in nicely, but just as it got to mid-corner, he got that push. It's where it goes off camber. It's not in your favour. So, and just when that front end gripped up, it gave him a quite a nasty snap of oversteer there. So the car certainly, from my point of view, doesn't look as good as it did yesterday for Lewis Hamilton, as Max Verstappen runs very wide at the final corner there. He's done a personal best in the middle sector, but not a personal best in the last sector. And is that a little bit of a shake of a head there from Max Verstappen as he completes his lap?
Not happy. Verstappen, from the looks of this, he was just having a glance across at the big screen to see where he was and how much time he's got to find Fernando Alonso. It's 97 thousandths of a second, less than a tenth of a second between Alonso and Verstappen. They are the top 2. Norris, Russell, Piastri, the top 5. Perez, Stroll, Hamilton, who's just come into the pits, is 8th in front of Albon and Zhou, the top 10. Then it's Leclerc, Bottas, Sargent, Tsunoda, Sainz, the top 15. Magnussen, Ricciardo, Ocon, Hülkenberg and Gasly, the top 20. This is the sound of Pierre Gasly coming into the right-hander of turn 8, up through the gears, reaching just shy of 255 kilometres an hour before he slams onto the brake back downhill. The sun glints off the helmet as he now makes his way towards turn 11. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas is just starting on quite a fast lap in the Haas, going very quickly in sector 1. He's right down in 19th at the moment, so that's one to monitor for Nico Hülkenberg. Gasly is finding time overall on himself. He's currently 20th and last. Kevin Magnussen in the other Haas is also finding more time. He's stuck on a new set of soft compound tyres. Everyone trying to find some potential qualifying setups ahead of qualifying later this evening under the lights. Gasly crosses the line and he goes 16th fastest, 1.4 seconds off the pace in that Alpine. And I'm sure we didn't see it there, but there would be a little bit of a shake of the head too from Gasly as we get a look at the early stages of his lap. Lost a bit of time once again coming through turn 4, much like Hamilton, but a bit more aggressive for Gasly.
Yeah, that was much more aggressive. And just riding on board now, he's waiting for that front end to grip, which is really the nature of that corner due to the camber. And then when it does grip, it's such an aggressive snap. But I'm predicting really not a great start, is it, for Alpine? They're probably going to be, at the end of this session, at the bottom of the pile, because Nico Hülkenberg just had a great lap in the Haas and jumped up into 7th place, 0.3 of a second off Alonso at the top of the times, and Magnussen is making improvements as well, and so is Daniel Ricciardo. So we'll keep an extra eye on that, and that is the sound you can hear now, is riding on board with Daniel Ricciardo as he's going to come across the line and move further up the field in his RB. Sorry, that's Yuki Tsunoda. So Tsunoda moves up into 11th place. Ricciardo is up there now in 9th, and he does improve as well.
Now, there is the same old caveats in practice, as we don't quite know the engine modes or the fuel loads. But Hulkenberg and a Haas over a one lap, once again, 3/10 off of Alonso. He's 7th fastest in between Perez and Stroll, and Haas were downplaying their performance this year massively in pre-season testing, as Carlos Sainz now goes fastest with a 1:38 in his Ferrari. Do you think Haas have been downplaying it too much, or is it still a bit too early to read into that? Because it's not a shabby lap from Hulkenberg.
I mean, I can't imagine everyone is turning down their engine right down, and Haas have got it right up. So I think, yeah, that's a very decent effort from Hulkenberg to stick it up there in the top 8 for now, as Lewis Hamilton's on another lap out there, but he's not setting the world alight in the first sector, so I highly doubt he's going to make any improvement. The sparks continue to fly out of the back of the Mercedes, but I would say that's, I mean, you're never going to big yourselves up. None of them are going to sit here and be like, yeah, we're looking really good, we're potentially going to win. You're always going to downplay it ever so slightly. But Hulkenberg, that's a good lap. Magnussen's down in 19th, whether he's had an issue gone off somewhere. He is out circulating, but again, not doing anything particularly special. Someone who is doing something a little bit special from the timing screen, and that is Charles Leclerc now. His teammates just jumped up to the top of the times as we await him to come through the first sector, but he, in the mini sectors, has apparently gone green, green, green and purple. So all the colours that we have on offer there to us, as he is going to come through that first sector, but it's not as good as I thought it would be.
No, lost a bit of time in the last couple of mini sectors to Leclerc. I wonder if he's made a little bit of a mistake or just lost a bit of time. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc up through the gears from 5th into 6th. He slams on the brake once more, down through the gears. 5, 4, 3, 2 into the left-hander of turn 10. Up into 7th gear, coming into the middle sector now. Personal best so far, everything lighting up green for Charles Leclerc on his dashboard in front of him. Up on his own time, but how close can he get to his teammate Carlos Sainz, who currently has the fastest overall? He's still nearly 2/10 off Sainz overall on this lap, so he's going to have to find that in this long straight down towards the final corner for Charles Leclerc to try and get close and pip his teammate round the final 2. And towards the line for Charles Leclerc. It's personal best, but it's not overall the fastest. Leclerc slots in to 4th with a 1:31.094. So a couple of tenths off of his teammate Carlos Sainz, who is fastest with a 1:38. Then it's Alonso, Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris the top 5, Russell, Piastri, Perez, Hulkenberg and Stroll the top 10 after a little series of fast runs from everybody in the field on some soft rubber.
That didn't look great there, car-wise, handling-wise for Charles Leclerc, especially over those exit curbs, and he did lose some time onto the main straight. A little bit sideways, too sideways for his liking, I would expect, hence why he probably didn't move higher up the order, as Magnussen now 6/10 down on Carlos Sainz, but he has set a personal best in the middle sector, so he will jump a little bit higher up, I expect, if he keeps up this progress heading down into the final corner. Under 2 minutes remaining of the session now. Keeps it certainly tidier than Charles Leclerc on the exit there. Comes across the line, does Magnussen, and he pops up into 14th place. 0.8 of a second off, and a good, 4/10 off his teammate.
Yeah, well, if you look at last year, Magnussen over one lap was certainly slower than Hulkenberg, but Magnussen seemed to fare better in races compared to Hulkenberg down at Haas. Magnussen's been on the radio throughout the session today, just really trying to get a full understanding of the soft compound of tyres, and tyres were the Achilles heel of Haas in 2023. In fact, they spent the entirety of pre-season testing here last year not chasing outright lap time, fully focusing on how their car treated tyres over the course of one laps, qualifying efforts and long running pace for races before they even bothered trying to dial in the car for chasing outright performance. So let's see if they are still chasing the tyres, because if you get the tyres right, that's one of the biggest battles won as far as a team and a driver is concerned, as Ocon crosses the line and goes 18th fastest. and then eases off the power down towards turn 1. Still quite a few people out on track, with the exception of Lewis Hamilton, who's been in the pits.
Actually, last corner as well. But certainly is getting low.
Leclerc on the radio there, saying he struggled to see out of the last corner. So, I mean, the sun is obviously beginning to set, but I wonder, don't they have special visors that are able to deal with that kind of thing?
No, well, you do. There are various different tints of visor depending on the make and manufacturer of the helmet. Charles Leclerc uses Bell, and I know from using them as well, they have plenty of different types of shades and tints that they can stick on and use. And I'm expecting he will certainly be on the strongest tint that's allowed in racing terms. But the sun's going to be the same for everybody, isn't it, Charles? So unfortunately, you have to get on with it in one word as his teammate crosses the line. No improvement at all there for Carlos Sainz, and it doesn't particularly look like anyone else is going to really improve. Charles Leclerc, no personal best for him. He's improved in the miniature sectors, but that's not overall equating to an overall performance gain in any of the sectors, as he heads down into the final corner now, where he was complaining about the sun. A little bit tidier, but it doesn't look particularly settled when he hits the gas, does it there? As he doesn't make any improvements at all, so I'm expecting, Harry, the order to pretty much stay as it is.
Yeah, I think so, and the checkered flag has now fallen as Leclerc heads down the main straight, bouncing quite a lot. Leclerc, they could really see we were riding on board with the Monegasque, his helmet moving up and down. We'll keep an eye on that. But that is the final practice session done and dusted. Next up it will be qualifying, but this was how FP3 ended. Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, fastest with a 1:38, a tenth of a second clear ahead of Alonso, Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, Russell, Piastri, Perez, Hulkenberg and Stroll. Ricciardo, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Magnussen and Albon, the top 15. Joe, the top 16. Bottas, 17th. Ocon, Sargent and Gasly, the top 20 drivers. The last practice session before we get into that all-important qualifying under the lights, and it's Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari who finished the session fastest, a tenth of a second quicker than Fernando Alonso. Max Verstappen was third in front of Charles Leclerc, and Lando Norris the top 5. Lewis Hamilton was down in 12th. All the teams and drivers still trying to dial in these cars. We won't get the true reading on the pecking order until qualifying, but everyone is expecting Verstappen and Red Bull to be at the very front.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, so that's how it's all unfolded. Can you believe it? We've had an RB, and that's not a Red Bull, don't forget. That's a Racing Bull of Daniel Ricciardo, fastest in FP1. Lewis Hamilton of Mercedes, fastest in FP2. And then Carlos Sainz, Ferrari, fastest in FP3. Not a Red Bull on top at all as we head towards that all-important qualifying session. Are you guys surprised, Harry?
No, not really, because we know what teams are like. We know what Red Bull's like. No one wants to show their hand too much, and I will be shocked if it isn't a Verstappen pole position in a few hours' time.
Oh, really?
Sorry, really? I know. I want it to be Sainz. I want it to be Alonso. I want it to be a fight. I want there to be a fight, but look, I want to be proven wrong. But my gut says Verstappen.
So, Alice, what are Red Bull and what's Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez doing then? What have they been playing at through these practice sessions? Just keeping it cool, sandbagging a little bit?
I wouldn't say they'd be playing it cool and sandbagging. They were the first to, let's say, do a proper qualifying run. I believe they did their run with about 12 to 13 minutes remaining of the session, whereas Carlos Sainz was pretty much the very last driver to do one in the remaining 3 minutes. So the temperature in between that time has dropped a couple of degrees. I'm sure you'll be able to tell us when standing out in the pit lane there, Rosanna. So the track, and that does make a difference. The track would have improved, would have cleaned up a little bit more with the wind that we've had and the sand being blown onto the track between the sessions. So I think qualifying will be close. I'm going to go different. I'm not going to say Max will be on pole, as now I know Benny is going to come in and tell me, don't be ridiculous, Alice. Of course Max is going to be at top of the times.
Come on then, Andrew. Who've you got on pole position this evening?
It does look close, actually, Rosanna. Closer than I was expecting it to be. Although
Okay.
I'm preparing for disappointment. So
in general.
Let's hope Formula One overachieves then this evening. Well, you can join us at 5 to 4 UK time. Qualifying gets underway at 4 o'clock. My thanks to Andrew, Alice and Harry. We will talk to you next ahead of qualifying, the all-important session to set the grid for tomorrow's Grand Prix. Join us then.